Here we go. Welcome to another exciting episode of Koffin Radio. I am Heartthrob Rob, and joining me today is the one, the only TJP. How you doing, brother?
Doing all right. Yourself?
I'm doing good, man. It's nice. The weather's getting a little better for me. You know how it is.
Yeah. I got you. I like cold weather, so it's nice to see it cooling down now.
Absolutely, man. It's such an honor to talk to you, man. I mean, you're considered, the youngest veteran. You've been everywhere from your current home of Impact Wrestling to Ring of Honor, MLW, WWE, PWG, and New Japan. It's incredible, man. I know you have the Super J coming up, Super J Cup coming up. But I was wondering if we could just start from the beginning. How did you really first fall in love with wrestling?
Well, it's weird. Like a lot of people have this kind of aha moment, I think. For me, I don't know that I ever really had that. I just kind of always assumed I would do it someday. I mean, I was just so absorbed by it, in almost like an introverted sort of way. My earliest memories are of watching Saturday night's main event with my dad, like in the mid '80s, and then as I got older, when I was a kid, I assumed everybody loved wrestling as much as me. Like that's how much it absorbed me. And then even though I knew that there was, doctors and firefighters and architects and teachers and stuff like that in the world, I assumed not just that I wanted to and will someday probably grow up and wrestle, but I thought that's what everybody wanted to do. Like I just assumed everybody was going to grow up and be a wrestler someday because I thought everybody loved it as much as I did. And so when I was maybe 11 or 12, when you start to get to an age where you do those like career day sort of things in school, and this is all I would ever write about. And like any kid that puts something like that, I want to play for the Lakers or whatever the case, you're told that that's not a viable path. And then and growing up in Southern California, I always kind of knew that there was, you would hear about people like Rey Mysterio starting at age 15 and things like that. And like guys growing like in Lucha Libre specifically, like in that culture, like kids that kind of grew up in the ring almost. And so I knew that there was a way for me to get started at an early age.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't know how. And at the time, there wasn't really the internet or anything. People might be shocked to know that I'm 36 years young. So when I was a kid, I mean, we're talking like 1998 was when I started. So, this was like 1996, 97 when I'm like trying to like look into how to become a wrestler. And you don't have any resources at that time. Really you watch Monday Night Raw and then you watch Nitro and you read PWI magazine, and that's about it. So, I started writing to schools that are advertised, wrestling gyms that were advertising PWI magazine. They usually had these black and white advertisement pages, and so this was maybe around 1998, and Dean Malenko had a school, and like there was like Al Sharp or Larry Sharp, I'm sorry, then All Pro Wrestling in San Francisco area, stuff like that. And for a 13-year-old kid, that's not really a viable thing to to try and do. You can't relocate, and most of these places at the time, wrestling was different. It was harder to start early at that time. You couldn't just, most of the time you had to be 18 or 21. They were looking for college age people,
And still a big man sport.
Yeah, very much so. So a lot of these were kind of a no-go for me. And it wasn't really until I sort of stumbled across Jesse Hernandez and Bill Anderson had a wrestling school, and it was in San Bernardino. And then there's other places like, Gil's Garage and like a lot of Lucha Libre gyms throughout Southern California that I came to find. So once I got started at Bill and Jesse's, it was easy to sort of network and like, oh, okay, you came from this gym, I'm going to go to that gym, and then this gym, and then the rest was history after that.
That's cool, man.
I blink and then I'm here.
Right? Time flies,
Yeah.
That's for sure, man. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think you also did, it's crazy that that's such like at a young age, at 15 pretty much almost, right? And even younger than that. I mean, you're really writing and going to school and doing all that. That's very crazy.
Yeah, I was 13, my freshman year of high school is when I started.
Oh my God, that's incredible, man. That's crazy. I believe you trained for New Japan Pro Wrestling as well at the Anoki Dojo in LA in 2001. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct.
I know that you later became, the youngest gaijin, right? Was it a culture shock for you that wrestling is, for a Japanese-based crowd, and that wrestling is taking you, where it is taking you? I mean, how crazy was that feeling?
I mean, it was
one day to being part of it. I mean, and you're still such a young kid at the time when it happens to you. What was that feeling like?
Yeah, New Japan recruited me. I had been wrestling for 3 or 4 years at this point, a few years, I was in my senior year of high school. So they recruited me towards the end of my senior year. So this is like spring, summer of 2002, something like that.
Oh, okay.
And the link came from, because they got their gym set up right around that time. I remember that just hanging the bags and stuff, and like they were setting it up and all that. And they had a link. The link was UPW, which was like a developmental for WWF at the time, and which I was part of, so I guess maybe to illustrate the insanity of that, imagine a 15, 16-year-old kid wrestling on NXT, and that's like what I was at UPW at the time. I wasn't under contract, obviously I was a minor, and I'm not, I wasn't like considered to be like somebody that should be like under contract. I was just good enough to be there is really all it was. So like, I was in like the same class as John Cena, Victoria, a lot of the WWF guys at the time that were just breaking in. And kind of from there is how I got picked up by New Japan as far as getting on their radar. And so they set up this satellite gym in LA, and I mean, English class, the beginning of summer, graduation, and by October I was already on my first tour. So it's a culture shock as far as my age. And it's also a lot of the reason why, like, over the years, Kobe Bryant became such a big hero for me, because, for an LA guy at the time, Kobe had just gone from high school to the NBA in 96, 97. Mm-hmm. And me being, growing up in Los Angeles area, and like, being a big Lakers guy, obviously, and then, seeing that, and then like just a year or two later, like I'm sort of doing the same thing. 1998, I'm in high school, I'm wrestling with adults, and then my first big league shot comes, and that's literally right from high school. So I kind of, not that I draw that comparison or anything, but like I used to kind of look at that as like guidance, like, okay, how did he do it? So
no,
and I could only imagine, because you read stories, like I've read some, obviously he's like a hero of mine, so you read stories, and it's like, he would be on his first road trips in the NBA ordering cereal from like room service and not really knowing what to do, like he was, I think, mature beyond his years, and obviously like skilled and prepared beyond his years, which, in some ways I was too, but he's still a kid, he's still a child, and he doesn't, he's learning on the fly how to handle himself with these guys who are adults. These are 28, 29, 31-year-old dudes in their prime that have been making millions and doing this for a while. And he's got to like catch up. And that was how it was for me. My first tours, Scott Norton was the gaijin, that was still there, Bart Gunn was there. Josh Barnett was part of the MMA movement that was in New Japan at the time. So these are like the Americans that I was going on tour with. And I mean, these are real men, so it's like, I go from English class to, here's $3,000 in yen. Here's your hotel. Here's your touring schedule. Good luck. And,
wow.
On a business class flight to Japan. So yeah, it was a culture shock in that way, but the wrestling was not a culture shock to me. My goal was always to go to New Japan, and to get to CMLL. Those were my two goals. Eddie was always my guy growing up, and that's how he did it. Obviously I was a WWF fan and WCW fan like anybody else, but for me, I grew up always wanting the J Cup. That's the type of stuff I wanted, the, Tokyo Dome, things like that. And so I thought I would never get to New Japan, because at the time, again, no internet, no, resource. You don't know how to make that path. At the time, it was just rolling the dice. Now you can sort of figure it out with YouTube and Google, Twitter. You can kind of make those connections. But at the time, it was like, shooting blind. And for that to be the first team to kind of draft me was like, it was unreal to me. So as far as the wrestling, it wasn't a culture shock because I just thought that's always where I wanted to be, was in front of those crowds. So once I was there, I was kind of natural feeling like, as far as that goes.
That's cool, man. I mean, yeah, like you said, I personally, I see an 18-year-old, I'm like, that's a kid to me. So 18, 19.
No, absolutely.
And for you to be out there, across the world, on your own, doing your thing, doing what you love, that's amazing. That's crazy, man. That's cool. Like you said, you looked up to Eddie and, the Lucha Libre style, and, also, obviously you're in New Japan at the time. You have such an amazing style and a mix of moves that everyone loves. Did you attribute that to your early time in New Japan and Mexico as well? Is that where you learned most of your style? Because, I mean, you were selling out Arena Mexico at the age of 18 already, weren't you?
Yeah. So my 2002, I debuted in New Japan. Two trips or two tours later, they organized sort of like a talent trade. Me, Rocky Romero, Bobby Quantz at the time, because Ricky Reyes was hurt. They sort of traded us to CMLL for like 2000. So we spent 2003 in Mexico, basically.
Okay.
So it's kind of like year one Japan, year two Mexico, sort of in that way. And yeah, I mean, like, it was still an older generation at the time in both companies. So, in Japan, it was still sort of like the Guerrero, Benoit, Liger generation. That was like the guys that were still there and still in their prime. So we learned from them, and it was still Inoki's company. So we learned a lot of old school type stuff, which his generation is like the 70s and early 80s. And then in Mexico, CMLL is regarded as the more traditional company. So like, a lot of our style of touring and the wrestling and the guys we were wrestling, it was a lot of traditional lucha libre. So, like just this, like, I just posted a piece of my match from this last week on Impact, and I used the Romero special, La Tapatía, which is the Mexican surfboard. And somebody asked me what I call this move. And it's like, some of this stuff is so old now, like the traditional stuff, that like people don't realize it even existed. It's so old. So that was the type of stuff we were learning at the time. And it was in the process of these styles starting to get old, and now all of a sudden it's new again. So, we had a traditional upbringing, and that's definitely where all this stuff comes from for me.
Yeah, I mean, I saw you do the surfboard, just last night on an episode of Impact, and I hadn't seen that since since WCW, NWO, doing that. So yeah, that's cool, man. I'm glad that you're still working that old style. Early on in your career, you rocked, a few masks. You wore a few masks. You had Puma. You did Manic and then Suicide for a minute there. Do you ever miss rocking the masks?
Sometimes, I've always looked at wrestling. I mean, you look at it as athletics or a sport, I guess, in some ways. So it's always hard to describe like what I am as far as like a career. Like if people ask, if I'm in an Uber, like, what do you do for a living, or what are you? Like, you could say you're a pro wrestler or whatever, but when you have to classify, it's like, what am I? A pro athlete? Am I a pro actor? Like, I don't know. So it's kind of hard to explain it. I don't look at it as much on the sporty side as some guys do. I look at it more artistically. So I kind of look at it like
storytelling.
Yeah, I look at it as a show, almost like movies. So in that way, I sort of miss the masks, because I've been able to play so many different characters, like over the last 22 years. So it's kind of like, I've always looked at wrestling the way I guess maybe like Johnny Depp looks like at his movie career. Like he plays Edward Scissorhands, he's Jack Sparrow, he's a Sweeney Todd, he's all these different characters, and they're also vastly different. And I like that. El Bombero is so different than Puma, so different than Suicide and Manic, and so different from other stuff that I've done. Like, so I kind of miss it for that reason. I like playing characters. I've never really been the type that's like legacy driven. Like, I've never thought like I want people to remember who TJ is. Like, I've always thought it'd be cool just to create all these fun little things that are fantasy. And, if they disappear when I'm gone, then they disappear when I'm gone. I just want to have fun.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, you are playing a character, but, sometimes you want to divulge into that character and not just be, you know, TJP or whatever it might be. I'm just saying, like, it's hard to differentiate, you know,
it's fun to create, you know?
Exactly.
It's fun to create, yeah.
That's cool, man. In 2003, you also joined PWG, and you had matches there with the Young Bucks, Scorpio Sky, and Excalibur. What are some of your memories from that era?
That was a crazy transition era, because that was like the start of the independent wrestling boom, you know.
WCW was gone now.
Yeah, PWG launched in like 03, but then like Ring of Honor and TNA had launched a year prior. Like they were both in year one around like 2001, 2002. And all of these companies I was like got in year one. And then like MLW started in 2004, and that became a huge like nexus of a lot of the indie guys. Like I remember one particular MLW weekend in 2004 when it was like all these indie guys that were starting in all these different platforms, like a PWG and Ring of Honor and stuff that were starting everywhere. They all kind of converged in MLW because Court Bauer booked them all together. We're all in Orlando. Yeah. So like, I remember it was like, you know, Chris Hero and Sanjay Dutt and like, you know, myself, the Pitbulls, you know, TJ Wilson. So Tyson Kidd and like Harry Smith, Teddy Hart, like all these guys were all like Jack Evans. We're all like meeting each other for the first time and more. I mean, there were so many of us there, like 50 guys, you know, American Dragon, Spanky, all these guys. Some of us knew each other from some places, but this is the first time we're all in one spot. And that's really what I remember around that time, that like, you know, 02 to 04, like that like year period or the 2-year period or so is like, you know, PWG popped up and all that. And PWG was fun because there were some precursors before that in LA with MPW and Rev Pro, Revolution Pro. So for some indie fans now, they probably recognize Rev Pro as like the UK. And the original version, which they're not linked, but the original namesake was a company in Los Angeles, and it was basically PWG in a tiny garage, is what it was. And so like I remember doing these Revolution Pro shows and then doing, you know, Millennium Pro, which kind of started after that. And that was really like the first template for, I think, PWG, because Millennium Pro is now like a larger scale indie as far as not being in a garage. Like they would book community centers and they were booking out of town talent. So I remember like Low-Key came to the West Coast for like the first time. Like nobody even knew any, so we didn't even know what Low-Key looked like. You know, because you got to remember, like, this is like 2001, maybe.
Internet's still young. I tell people all the time. Before like the internet, man, you couldn't just look someone up and find their social media and see what they had for lunch this morning. We would just word of mouth, and you'd have to listen. And my friend's cousin said that he saw a tape, and this guy was dope. It was like that. It really was. Yeah, like so. 2001 or so. A lot of it, we didn't know what Low-Key even looked like. We didn't know if this dude was like a 6'2", like guy with long hair or what. You hear about this guy, same thing with Amazing Red. I remember hearing about Amazing Red for so long and before I met him. And so MPW in LA was like kind of the first LA company that was really like, let's book these matches for like independent fans. We'll do Low-Key versus Super Dragon or, stuff like that. And so then, when PWG came about, it was almost like the boys took the reins from the previous promoters that were handling Rev Pro and Millennium Pro. And they were like, let's just do it ourselves. We'll do it by committee. And obviously, it's still around to this day. And that's what they do. They bring in all this talent from around the country that have yet to really break out, And then in 2006, you were on MTV's Ill-Fated Wrestling Society X. What was that like?
That was fun. I mean, it was wild. It was kind of, if we would have got, I think, multiple seasons of that, it was kind of like Lucha Undergrounds before Lucha Undergrounds. And if you swap out the cinematic stuff for more like ECW type of feel, like it was a little bit grittier than Lucha Underground was and less cinematic. And it felt more like MTV a little bit, because of the filming style and obviously the production and all that. But I thought it was it was a lot of fun, and I wish that it's so funny because people still like I do interviews and things all the time, and people will still ask about Wrestling Society X, as far as like diehard wrestling fans still remember it as like this project that came up, and so that to me says like, I wish they would have had more time with it, because then like maybe it would have been a bigger staple of like that generation of wrestling. But it was a lot of fun, it was kind of like the original Lucha Underground.
I don't see why it couldn't have worked, or they should have put more maybe thought process or kept it around and tried to fine tune it. I mean, you had rock and wrestling in the 80s that worked. And I feel like MTV is, everybody in high school is watching MTV, right? The college crowd, high school crowd. And I feel like that's right wrestling's alley. I feel like that was perfect marketing, or somehow they should have made that work, but, a season or two, I think that's all it lasted. But yeah, it's cool. I think kind of random that you were in that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that was another one that was sort of like a nexus for a lot of people. They had a lot of different performers and stuff on that roster that weren't always working in the same places. So I thought that was really cool too.
Yeah, absolutely. In the mid to late 2000s, you had matches in Impact Wrestling and Ring of Honor. You were really honing your craft at this time. What was the road life like back then?
I mean, it was a little bit easier than when I first started. I was having to ditch school and like arrange rides and stuff like that. I guess the difference is like a typical week for me when I first started, like 98, 99, 2000, around these times, was like, I would go to school during the week about Monday through Thursday. And every night I would, go and train at night for a few hours. And then usually there was, at a certain point, there was multiple wrestling gyms open. So I would train for a few hours and go to another one, train for another couple hours. And then on Friday, usually I would ditch school like around lunchtime maybe. And I would ditch around lunchtime and get picked up by somebody who was doing the Friday night show somewhere. So then we would go to that show. So let's say we would go to a show in, I don't know, Orange County or something like that. And then I would ask somebody in the locker room, like, okay, because it was regional, so, we'd do the Friday night show, in Anaheim or something. And I'd say, okay, who's on the show in Oakland or whatever. And I'd ride with them. And then it was like, okay, who's on the show in San Diego on Sunday or whatever. And then I'd ride with them. And then, okay, who has to go back to like the Inland Empire area? Cause I got to go to school on Monday. And that's how I would do it. I would just get home that way.
Who's taking the 91 freeway home, baby?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. That's actually why I have,
show it off. Let the people know.
So I have that this on people always ask about the freeway sign that's on there. So this is like my home freeway. So yeah, that's usually how it was. And just some combination of, San Francisco area or Las Vegas, Anaheim, LA, San Diego, maybe Phoenix occasionally, and Tijuana across the border. So usually there was shows going on every weekend, 2 or 3, and I would just ride to whichever ones, Pomona, wherever it might be. Now in like 2004, 5, 6, it was a little bit better because now I could drive myself for one, so it was good.
Finally,
you're
still a youngster. You're still young as hell, right there.
Yeah, and just out of high school. And, for a few years, I didn't really do anything for the, like, indies and stuff. I might do the occasional PWG and Ring of Honor at the time, which was maybe a little bit bigger than just a common indie, But a lot of it was New Japan, TNA, Mexico. So it was really just that, probably until about 2006. So it was almost like for a few years, except for a handful of independent shows, I really wasn't doing a lot of indies because I was doing more of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So, later on, it became easy to travel because I could drive, but because I wasn't really on the indies, I didn't have the same type of circle that a lot of the guys had. So I was doing all these shows kind of by myself. So I was like doing these road trips by myself usually. Yeah. Because a lot of the guys I didn't come up with, I was off doing some other stuff.
In 2013, you debuted as Manic and had some crazy steel cage matches, ladder matches. How did you like your Impact run as Manic? And how much different was the landscape back then?
Um, well, I feel like that might have been in some ways it was kind of like peak company time, I think, for TNA Impact, like
Yeah.
just because like the scope of it, like, that was still around the Spike TV days, but then, around the time when I became Suicide, they were now traveling and doing bigger arena shows.
Hmm.
Like my first show as Suicide was at the Sun Dome in Tampa, Florida, which that's the same place they did the Royal Rumble in 1993. So like
Oh yeah.
they were doing like, I would say at that time there was like AEW sized, because they would do these arenas that were like not like 20,000 seaters, but they were like mid level, and they were on like a strong national channel, and they had a lot of national attention as far as like, wrestling fans go, as far as like a
Hmm.
wrestling show. And they had a lot of, talent that were like worldwide names, like significant guys. You think Sting, Kurt Angle, Jeff Hardy, the Dudley Boys,
Household
you know,
names.
yeah, Steiner, Booker T. There's so many guys that were there, and coming in and out at that time. So that to me was sort of like their peak. I think maybe a few years before that, in the mid to late 2000s, there was like maybe like peak buzz. Like the matches were like really trendy amongst diehard fans with like AJ and like Joe
Oh,
and a
yeah.
lot of the guys. But I think that it still had close to the same buzz, but so much bigger like scope in terms of the types of shows they were producing, like right around that 12, 13, 14 time.
Hmm.
And then, just network swaps, Destination America and Pop TV. And then, some shows like being produced in like lower scale arenas and stuff like that. They started to, downsize a lot. But that I think was like peak time, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was a ton of fun doing those shows, and being Suicide and Manic at the time was really cool, because it was the first time I took over a character that was like pre-designed, and it was cool because, it turned out that the way that I played it was kind of the way they had always envisioned it being portrayed, but they just didn't really have guys that were going to do it that way. They had more like heavyweight style guys, like Christopher Daniels, Kazarian. They wrestle more like heavyweights.
Bigger dudes.
Yeah, so like I think that it was kind of the first time they had the right style and build that they kind of felt like it would be. I
Hmm.
guess it's kind of like George Lucas, he writes A New Hope, and he knows that he wants episode 1 through 3, but he doesn't have the means to make it. So you see the lightsaber battles in A New Hope, and by the time he gets to like Anakin versus Obi-Wan, he's like, well, this is what I always wanted it to be. It's just at the time it wasn't the right guys. So I feel like it was fun because I got to do that, and Chris and Frankie are two longtime friends of mine, so it was really cool to kind of like take over a character that they had outgrown. To be honest, if we're being honest, they were bigger than that character, so it was nice to kind of take it on from them, which was cool.
No, I mean you definitely fit it. I mean, Suicide, Manic, like those are. Let's go out there and do crazy stuff. Let's get that style going. So for sure, I think you fit it. You kicked ass as Manic, man. That was cool.
I appreciate that.
Um,
Hold on,
I want
I
other.
gotta do an egg pose for one of the commenters.
Okay.
For Ali, it's an egg pose.
Okay.
If I don't do the egg pose, I'll hear it 700 more times. All right, continue.
Okay. Cool. I wanted to say too, we're both wearing Owen Hart shirts, by the way.
Oh, I didn't even realize that. I couldn't
Yeah.
see the rest of the.
My
Yeah,
friend commented. Yeah. How
yeah,
cool
that's
my
nice.
pictures in
All
the comments.
right.
She told me we were both rocking it. Um, I wanted to bring this up too. I know that it's been 5 years, since the Perro Aguayo Jr. situation.
Yeah.
And I was just, that happened in Mexico. And obviously that's no one's fault, no one at all. But I know you were there in the ring at the time when that happened. And I was just wondering, how was the healing process from that for you? I mean, that's, kind of, a situation for sure.
I mean, it's weird. I mean, in a lot of ways, I don't think everybody really sort of completely healed from it. The biggest, I don't know. I think the best way to kind of put the scope for that is that, like, I mean, it's not every day that you sort of face a tragedy or even hear about a tragedy, but like, it was such a shock to our system that, I mean, literally after the show was over, the last thing I said to Ray when we left Auditorio was, you know, I'll see you at the hospital, or, you know, let's go check up on Perro and we'll see him, you know. And it was like, I was in a van with, you know, some other Americans, and then, you know, they were kind of getting updates and checking. It's like, okay, Perro got to the hospital, and okay, they went there, and blah, 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 blah. And then it was like, okay, we're going to have to cross the border, so we're not going to get a chance, but we'll just keep tabs on him. It was okay. And then kind of waiting to hear from other people that had went to go see him. And then the next thing you hear is like, oh, well, we lost Perro. And it's like, it was so like, it was such a jarring thing that, you know, I had to drive back to Riverside when we crossed back to San Diego, and it was like, I'm 2 hours into this drive, and I'm still going home, kind of feeling like I just need to go home and go to sleep, and like it's a normal day. And all I could think about is, wow, we lost Perro. And then I'm getting like dozens and dozens of messages over and over and over, like, are you okay? What happened? Blah, 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 blah. And like, you know, Impact, I was with Impact at the time, and they're checking up on me and making sure, you know, which they were so incredible about that. Dixie and Bob Ryder, they were incredible about that, like checking and making sure that, you know, I was okay and in an okay state of mind and everything. And it was like, it wasn't hitting me. Like I knew, but it doesn't really sink in. And to this day, it's like, I don't think it ever fully sunk in. And everything, you know, when you try to remember it, that entire match plays out in slow motion to me, because you kind of think like, how, like, God, like, how can we not prevent this from happening, you know? And, you know, playing it in slow motion, you see all these individual things that are happening, you kind of recount it. And it's like, you just never expect something like that to happen. And it really kind of sheds a light. And I hope nobody in my position ever has to go through that in my profession. Like I pray nobody ever, obviously it's going to come up sometime, you know. Obviously there was like Silver King and stuff like that, you know. It happens. La Parka, it happens, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But like I pray nobody ever has to experience it. But if you ever do, and if you're ever in the unfortunate position to do it, you really realize how out of control our job is. Like we are so close to tragedy every single day, and you take for granted that things work. It's like, oh, this works, what we're doing works, but it's not an exact system, man. I mean, we don't go to college for this. There's no engineering degree for what we do, you know. And so when that happens, you realize, like, God, man, like one domino falls the wrong way, and the entire thing is one big tragedy. And it's so that's really the best way I can put it, is that.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I wanted to say, you know, I apologize you had to go through that. I'm sorry. And, you know, like you said, it's not science. You know, you guys are going out there putting your body on the line every single night, every time you're out there, you know. But I just want to say, from, you know, as a fan, you know, of everything that, you know, the sport has given me, and just, you know, everything that you've done for this sport as well. Like, I just want to say thank you, man. I really appreciate, you know, everything that you've done, and going out there and, you know, putting yourself out there on the line like that. That's very cool of you, man.
I know. I mean, we definitely appreciate it, and I think that stuff like that makes guys appreciate it more, because again, you don't realize it, you know. And we take the good for granted and the bad. You know, we assume nothing bad will ever happen, and when we hear good things, we think, whatever, who cares about your opinion, blah 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 blah. Thanks, but no thanks, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just what we do. But you know, like, I mean, I think stuff like that, and especially, like, you know, a few years prior, I was homeless, you know, like these types of things changed my perspective a lot from when I was younger till now. Like, you know, when I was younger, I didn't really take wrestling that seriously. I was just having fun. It was almost like Wild Thing, Rick Vaughn, you know, in Major League. You know, he gets to Major League 2, and all of a sudden he's wearing a suit, and he's like, you know, I'm not the guy I was, you know, last year, and I was just out there having fun. I didn't know what a career was. That's what I was for like the first 10 years of my career. And then, you know, being homeless changed that perspective. You understand about priorities and family and taking care of loved ones and yourself and why you're doing it. And like, it's not just about money, it's about a message, and it's about, and helping others, inspiring others, and being a good person, giving back to the business and all that. And then, again, like hopefully nobody has to go through a tragedy. Somebody inevitably will, but when you do, that, again, gives you perspective. It's like, when people are telling you they appreciate what you do, like, that could be that. I mean, that's important. Like what you do is very daunting. I mean, we're walking a tightrope and you forget that. So things like that, I mean, I'll never take it for granted again. So I appreciate your words very much.
Yeah. And I mean it, man. And then, that was 2015, but 2016, it seems, things are rolling. And I know, WWE wasn't on your big bucket list, like it was, like New Japan was. But in 2016, you joined WWE. What were the preliminary talks for you to wrestle for that company and to do the Cruiserweight Classic?
Let's see. Well, I had left TNA 2015, I think. And I guess I spent a lot of 15 just sort of doing some indies. I was picking and choosing a little bit. I went back to Mexico a few more times. And I was really hoping to sort of get back to going to Japan and doing, maybe going down and staying in Mexico long form, maybe AAA or something like that. I'd been in TNA for like 3-4 years, and then Ring of Honor for a couple of years before that, when they just started the Sinclair era. I was there, and then before that, I was in Lucha Libre USA, another MTV show, for a couple seasons. So there was like a stretch of maybe 5 years or so where I was just kind of coming out of being homeless and in these like dedicated positions. So I was kind of in 2015 looking forward to going back to Japan and Mexico and stuff like that. Early 2016 or maybe late 15, I can't remember when it was, and Regal called me and mentioned that they had this concept for a cruiserweight tournament, and it wasn't a long form idea or anything like that. It was just a tournament, and nothing about a new show, nothing about a title, nothing. It's just, hey, we want to do this tournament. We have this new thing, the WWE Network, and we're trying to build content for it. And this is just an idea we had that's a little bit different from most of the stuff we produce. So, I said, okay. I knew at the time that it would sort of become like kind of an important footnote for this generation of wrestling. Like it'll be a moment in history, so to speak. Like the J Cup was to Japan. Like I knew that this tournament would mean something, even if nothing after it meant anything. So I was like, okay, I definitely am interested. I would like to do it. And, I waited. They built out the rest of the field and everything. And then, we did the tournament, and I didn't intend on staying. I mean, when the tournament wrapped and I won the title, I wasn't under contract. I had turned down the deal they offered. I told them I wanted to go I wanted to do Lucha Undergrounds. I had already met with Lucha Underground. Me and Penta did a dark match on an episode that didn't air. We just did it for the live crowd, and they had said they're interested in having me for upcoming seasons or whatever. And I really wanted to do that, and I wanted to go back to Japan and stuff like that. And he really kind of pulled me aside again afterward, or like in the middle of the tournament, was like, you really should consider staying. Like you're starting to get older. You can settle down, lay some roots and stuff. And then if you don't like it, just leave, later. You can leave in a few years if you don't want it. But that's kind of how that came about. I didn't intend on doing it. They just wanted something for the moment, and that moment became a few years, and now the guys are killing it. They have a whole cruiserweight show, and every generation gets better than the last, and so I'm happy to have been the catalyst for it.
I was going to say, you were the catalyst. I mean, that is your moment as well, man. That's very cool. You were the champion. You didn't even have a contract with them, and they bestowed the title on you. They know that you're the man, dude. This is you. And you didn't Medusa it, you know what I mean?
Well, I came from I'm a 90s guy. I came from a generation where handshakes were as good as a contract was. So you just don't do business like that, and so I never would have done that. But I do think it was funny. Like, you know, I wasn't signed to a contract until like right before the pay-per-view that I did the Clash of the Champions. So I remember
Uh-huh.
joking with the guys, like, you know, it's like I could just never show up again. But
Jeez. I'll hold you up like Jeff Jarrett. You're gonna have to pay me. How'd you like your video game theme? I mean, you have the entrance music and the attire. How'd you like that?
I loved it. After the tournament was over, before the pay-per-view, CFO Money had called me and they asked if I liked my music. They're oh, so on that note, that was funny because I didn't even know what a dab was. Like I knew what the pose was, but I didn't know I didn't know it was called a dab. And I was really just copying my favorite basketball player was Russell Westbrook. And at the time, it was like this huge gimmick for him to do these crazy pregame dances. So like, you know, for so many, yeah, for so many years I wasn't TJ, I was other characters, you know, Suicide, Puma, whatever. So when I was myself, and then I patterned a lot of my outfits like Floyd Mayweather, like I'd have like leather jackets with no sleeves and like a hood and like baseball hats and like jogger pants for gear and sneakers in the ring and stuff like that. So it was like streetwear, like high fashion type
You
stuff.
had it going. It was popping.
Yeah. And so then it was like, well, I need, like, what am I going to do in an entrance? So I was just literally just copying Russell Westbrook dances. And that was one of the things he did. Like on one of them was, he was like, you know, doing his thing, whatever, and then hit a dab on the dance. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So I remember just doing that in the match, and it just lit up Full Sail. And then I didn't care about ever doing it again. I just thought, okay, I just wanted to style on this fool. But then it was like, you know, the company's like, you got to do it again. And
It got
like,
over.
okay,
That's your gimmick now, baby.
yeah, I'll keep doing it. Now for better or worse, that's my diamond cutter pose. Like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's my crotch chop or whatever. But
it got over. It was over with the fans for sure.
I mean, to
cool,
this
man.
day, like kids and stuff, that's still like the thing. But yeah, that was funny. I didn't even realize what I did at the time. But yeah, CFO Money called and asked if I liked my music, and I told him it's a little bit too alt rock, you know. And I always kind of wanted to have the Scott Pilgrim type of character.
Oh, there you go.
Which, yeah, and like Ready Player One, Scott Pilgrim,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So like, and that came about because Drew Gulak, who's a longtime friend of mine, we were sitting and watching some of the matches during the CWC, and he was like, you know, he was like, I really liked your match tonight, and I said, oh, thank you, you know, likewise or whatever. How did everything go for you? And blah 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 blah. Just you know, we just clocked out, sort of thing. You know, we're hanging out at work. And he said, no, seriously, like you do things and they look so automatic. Like you make it look so easy. Like kind of like Muhammad Ali would box. Like it just looked like too, it looked like he was soft, you know? And like, it didn't look like it was hard for him. And he was telling me, he's like, you look like a human video game character. Like if we were all in a video game, you would be the character I'd want to play. And I never thought about it like that. And I've always been a big gamer. So when he said that, I was like, man, that's a great take on it. And I'd always wanted to create a character like that. So I told CFO Money, I said, can you, well, I was going to say, can you create Wiley's Castle? But originally when they called, they said, well, what are you into? We'll make you music that you do like, since the alt rock thing you didn't like. And I was like, I gave him the worst list of inspirations. They're like, what are you into? And I said, Elvis, Tupac, Chuck Berry, Notorious B.I.G., Ella Fitzgerald, Blink-182, Nirvana, Tchaikovsky. Like, I mean, I gave him the worst list of stuff, right? Because I like so many different things. Rolling Stones and, you know, Kendrick Lamar. Like, none of this shit goes together, right? And so, and they're like, okay. And they were so nice about it, but I could tell that they were like, we can't make anything with this. So I called him back 15 minutes later, and I was like, look, I love Mega Man 2. I love Wily's Castle. Can you create this? Because I had an idea. And so then when we went to our first Monday Night Raw, I was off, and I went straight to the production crew, and I said, guys, are you able to make stage graphics that look like Marvel versus Capcom, like a energy bar? And then they're like, yeah, and we could do this stuff too, like put like power-ups, like cherries and coins and stuff like coming up the ramp. And also, and I was like, perfect. That's exactly what I want. So the music came together so good. I'm biased, obviously, because it's my music, but like I feel like that's one of the best wrestling songs ever created. Like I think it's so unique and it's so like universally kind of loved by like a lot of people. So like I love it. Like I'm not saying it's like Steve Austin's music or something. It's not iconic, I guess, but I think it's one of the best songs ever created. So I was so blessed to be able to have it, and it went perfect with the stage graphics and everything. It was good, you know. And I wanted to represent like that people that were like my age, like not too terribly young, but not like middle aged yet. And there's this whole retro gaming, 80s, 90s era, like stuff all wrapped up into one. And I was like, nobody represents that generation. I was like, I wanted to give back to like the dudes that like, like me, you know. So.
Oh yeah, let's get our Sega and Super Nintendo on for sure. It's
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
that's cool, man. And then you were there for a few years. And then, we've been recently seeing this big exodus, from WWE. A lot of people have been leaving, or, on their own terms or not. But you were really one of the first to go, if not the very first to, really make that jump. And you did it on your own terms. It's been, almost 2 years since you've been free, or have left WWE. How did your time of freedom feel compared to being in that corporate machine?
Well, I think I was really lucky. Like myself, Kenta, Sean Spears, I would say Moxley, but that might be a totally different scenario because he's kind of a really big separate entity. But a few of us got out at a time where they didn't feel like they needed to protect everybody. So it was like, some guys are like, we definitely need to hold on to. Some guys are like, it's okay. There's not a big deal. But then it was like, I mean, literally, I want to say the next batch of guys that were like, we're going to ask out. They were like, no, none of you guys can go. So we kind of got lucky. And like, I sort of passively forced my way out. Not really. Like, I mean, I let them know I wanted to go, and they let me go at a time when they felt like, well, there's definitely not an idea that we have for you. So we just don't want you to be uncomfortable and all that. So it was like, I didn't have to quit, but it was like a peaceful release. It was nice. But I mean, I got lucky, getting out at that time, because now you see like guys, I guess this year's a little bit different with the pandemic, which sucks. A lot of people kind of got laid off or lost their job and everything. But, that first year, last year was amazing. I made more money than I did in WWE, which is great. And I made good money in WWE, but I made even more on my own. And, that really wasn't the ball that I had my eyes on, but it was a breath of fresh air to kind of discover how big like freelance wrestling had gotten. Because when I was in the indies before, it wasn't like this. There was no such thing as like YouTube channels and Patreons and merchandising and all this stuff that guys are doing. And like, Twitch, I was streaming on Twitch for fun. Like I wasn't even monetizing it in WWE.
Yeah.
And it's like now, like, there's Cameo and Twitch and all these things. And like earlier today, literally before we got on, I was like going through my weekly checklist, and I'm like, dude, I have like 6 jobs. And so like, yeah, like I'm a stream host. I'm an influencer.
There you go.
I have merchandise on 4 different like platforms, counting the collaborations with other people. I'm a public entity or a public figure, like through like Cameo, and then I'm a stuntman for motion capture for video games.
Very cool.
And then somewhere on that list, I'm also still a professional wrestler. So it's like I discovered all this last year, so it was an amazing breath of fresh air to be able to spread my wings, and it's like, wow, I could do all this stuff, and nobody's going to tell me no. That's great.
There's nothing wrong with different revenues of streams of revenue. There's nothing wrong with that at all. That's very
I mean, yeah, and it's awesome what people have created. I really owe it to all these new generations of indie guys coming up. It's funny. I'll do these shows and I'll meet these new generations because they weren't around when I was on the indies prior. And I'll meet them and they'll ask me questions or pick my brain about stuff. But I'm almost like, dude, like I got to thank you guys for giving me this amazing platform to go out into the world to, because you guys created entrepreneurs out of everybody. Now we all can like eat bigger pieces of the pie. Like that's amazing. Like I think it's incredible what guys have been able to do.
Hell yeah. You know, after you leave WWE, you know, you've been killing it on every indies that I've seen you on. You know, PCW, I was there for your match earlier this year.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously, you know, with every promotion calling you, besides money, what made you choose to go to Impact Wrestling?
Um, I always really liked it there. The locker room is one of the most pleasant locker rooms I've ever been in, and now is no different. In fact, it's gotten even better. I feel like there's it's one of the only time, maybe the only time I've ever been in a locker room where there's no pyramid. Everybody's in the same room. Guys that closed the night one day could open it the next night, and vice versa. Like nobody's really, there's no hierarchy, and I love that. And the management there are guys that have been part of the company previously as talent. So I think that's an amazing thing to be able to have guys that you can relate to, and vice versa. And they're the ones that are steering the ship. And I'm so incredibly appreciative of that. And I recommend anybody who ever does this job, and for young wrestlers when you're coming up, if you ever find any locker room or any job that's like that, stick with it, because it's so incredibly rare. Do not take that for granted and think that that's normal, because it absolutely is not. So if you ever find that, hang on to it for dear life, because if you can make a living at a place like that, and it feels like that, you'll never want to go to another place again. And they were always great before, you know. So that, and they were the first ones to call. They had a great idea right out the gate for what they really wanted me to be able to do, and offered me a lot of freedom. You know, and so I think that was a big thing too, is going back to being freelance, like having a place that is like, nope, we have no boundary lines. You can work with whoever you want. And that's amazing, because now the world is my toaster, as Chucky Finster would say on the Rugrats.
Hell yeah. There you go. You know, I loved everything you've been doing since you've gotten there. You know, your stuff with Fallah Bah, Chris Bay, you know, and Rohit. But, you know, obviously there's a pandemic going on. How has it been for you to dealing with that no crowd being there, with nothing there?
It's it's a lot like doing Japan when I first started, because that was kind of an era where they were real quiet a lot of times. So you kind of like didn't have that same barometer. I'm a classically trained, you know, pro wrestler performer. And so I was always taught to do this like I'm running the 2-minute offense, like Tom Brady or something, you know, no huddle. You know, you read the defense, you react, you read the defense, you react. And that's how you do it. You don't really have a script you run off. You just go moment to moment. So this is very different from the way that I was taught to do it. But, you know, I mean, I've been blessed with the experience of working with a lot of guys. So a lot of guys do tend to perform, you know, in a very scripted way. And then a lot of cultures, sometimes they have a system that seems very scripted, or very non-reactive, I guess you could say. It's non-malleable. And so, you know, having those experiences, right, I mean, it prepares me for this. And so some days it's just as easy as it otherwise would be. You miss the energy though, you know, I think, you know, obviously you miss the energy. I miss the energy a lot. And I've been able to do a few independents now towards the end of the year where we've had live crowds, and it's like I'm glad I didn't forget how to ride the bike, you know.
That's cool, man. I know you got things lined up for the Super J Cup. How have you liked New Japan since you've had been back over there?
Oh, it's great. I mean, I feel like under, you know, the management they've had in recent years, and the direction that they see the company going in regards to the direction wrestling as a whole is headed, is a great vision of what they want to do and where they would like us to be. And so being part of it again, and, you know, a lot of the old crew, like a lot of the old guys are still there. So it's cool to see them, and they're more in the mentor role now than they were before. And in a lot of ways I am too. There's a lot of times where I'm kind of put in a position to like kind of lead some of the young lions or something like that, or like advise them. And, you know, I never saw myself as a teacher like before, but now I've kind of gotten to this like age and position where now it's like I kind of am one. And
young OG.
Yeah, and it's great. I mean, it's very fulfilling, and the crowds are super lively now, and you know, again, with like the advent of social media and like the way that you know, uh, um, distribution platforms are able to be viewed by all kinds of different fans universally. So now all the different crowds around the world are starting to sort of become one culture, and that's pretty cool.
Hell yeah. Outside of, or what do you like doing when you're not wrestling? Staying with your
Um,
pigs?
I mean, I guess one of my seven other jobs.
Yeah, that's true. You're a busy
um,
man.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, you know, like I'm kind of a full-time parent to the pigs, and that's a big thing. And you know, I game all the time, so I'm constantly gaming, even when I'm not streaming. I'm constantly like playing games and stuff like that. And obviously, I'm a big sports guy. It's a big year for LA people.
There you go.
Dodgers and Lakers closed it out, and we haven't seen that since 1988, and that's pretty incredible. Um, you know, I'm not really that complicated. I don't go out much. I like to just kind of get lost in those sort of artistic interests, you know, as far as entertainment goes, you know, and I'm kind of a homebody. So
Very cool. I think I read somewhere that you're writing two horror movies.
yeah, last year I had written down concepts for a couple, and you know, I've never been part of that sort of process. So like, you know, I mean, even now I'm still kind of learning how to do it. But I had talked with and met with some people through like my manager and stuff that had worked with other producers and had like different content platforms and people attached to studios and things like that. And so I was kind of working with a couple people that were like, hey, if we can get a good concept and get a, you know, maybe not even a screenplay, but you know, get something written up, and we can maybe get a project going to produce a short, and then see if the short can launch something that's more you know, full length. And so I kind of presented a couple different ideas, and you know, little by little I work on it in my free time, but obviously this year has been sort of a write-off a little bit as far as getting anything done. But yeah, I was working on a couple. Horror movies are really like my favorite genre
Hell yes.
of content. So, you know, I love it. And so, you know, I came up with a couple things, and we'll see. I mean, you know, it could be one of those life after wrestling or life on the side of wrestling type things.
One more job to the seven you already got.
Yeah.
Very cool, man. So, you know, as we start to wind down here, any shout outs, anything, where can people follow you on social media?
Well, obviously here, you know, Mega TJP for Twitter and Instagram. I don't really have a whole lot of different social medias. I guess there's like sort of another newer one called Parlor. I have one there, same name. My Twitch is also Mega TJP. I stream. I don't have a streaming schedule because like my traveling schedule sometimes is erratic. But you know, usually every other day or so, every couple days I'll stream. So you can find me at twitch.tv/megatjp. My pro wrestling tees for those that are missing live shows and there's no outlet for merch. You can find a lot of my stuff on Pro Wrestling Tees under TJP, and then Mass Republic has a lot of stuff as well for me, and I believe they're working on some good stuff. So you might be able to see physical stuff in stores and stuff soon. I don't know. I'm not sure about that yet, but that's their ballpark.
Very cool, man. I actually bought one of your dolls earlier this year when we
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
When I saw you wrestling in January. That's
Yeah,
very
yeah,
cool.
yeah. And
Yeah,
that's really it. Yeah, I mean that's everything. And then I'm on Cameo. You can find me on Cameo as well.
very cool, man. Well, I want to thank you so much for everything you've done. You're one of the fucking best technical wrestlers ever, man. You're incredible. You're killing it. Young OG, the youngest veteran in the game. Thank you so much, TJP.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
For TJP and Heartthrob Rob, this is Koffin Radio. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you, brother.
See you.